Welcome to the Unleash This podcast. This will be our sixth session of this podcast series entitled Visionary E-commerce Platform Shopware Talks Gartner Magic Quadrant, AI, and Best Practices. With our guest today, e-commerce visionary himself and veteran of so many e-commerce platforms, Magento and Shopware, as of late, Ben Marks. Thanks for stopping by, Ben, for our podcast series. Would love to get an introduction in your words.
Yeah, what was I going to do after college, right? I wasn't going to use that psychology degree. So through just a happenstance, I ended up doing e-commerce development. Actually, almost straight away, I built a website, and then very quickly started getting requests as a freelancer, like, hey, I've got a brick and mortar store, and I want to go sell stuff online. So I at the time, 2003, so 20 years ago, I found OS Commerce and kind of taught myself programming, and and then over the years, I'd never set out to have a career in e-commerce or specifically open source e-commerce, but I just kept discovering different open source e-commerce solutions that provided more and more benefit over the years. Eventually, joining an agency that specialized exclusively in open source e-commerce. And then eventually, joined Magento. Now, a couple of years ago, though, I met the founders of Shopware, two brothers, and really learned a lot about their philosophy, about the nature of the business, as well as how they wanted to run their company, and how they were running the company at the time was like 250 people. And I said, absolutely, this is the home for me. So I joined Shopware at what is arguably the beginning of a real upward and global trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's probably a good starting point, right? To, following your meeting, and, I know since then, there's been so many achievements with Shopware in particular. I think Gartner, the recent Gartner Magic Quadrant for Digital Commerce study, labeled Shopware as a visionary, right, in that top right quadrant. How did Shopware get there?
Well, it's a really interesting thing. So especially as a European company, the analyst impact, companies like Gartner and Forrester, and there are a few others. Those may not be as much on the radar for the European businesses as they are certainly for the U.S., especially for technology buyers and for boards. When you're really trying to evaluate, all of these different vendors and their solutions. And then, one important thing to think about, though, is that each of these analyst houses, like sort of every year is a bubble, right? So the criteria change year to year. And there is, of course, a progression if one looks back retrospectively. But, we do try not to look at so much at the trend line. But yeah, it certainly is good to see yourself move in what we think are ever improving ways in terms of how these evaluations work. Now, one of the things that is really important, I think one of the first things that businesses learn as they start entertaining these analyst reports is they learn to be storytellers, right? And I don't mean fiction. I'm talking about nonfiction storytelling, but actually telling the good word about what you're building, what you're doing. And most importantly about where your product is going in the future. And so Shopware had already, by the time I joined, had already popped up in the Magic Quadrant, which I thought was a really a strong signal that they were taking worldwide expansion much more seriously and had started working in that direction. But in the last couple of years, we've become much better about actually telling the good word of the things that we're doing. And then also our product leadership and really just our how Shopware is built allows us to think about what's coming down the pipe, to understand what's important today, and to build out, like really release those features rapidly. And I think the best example that I can think of is our AI functionality. So back in May, we released a suite of 8 tools. This wasn't the first AI functionality that we put into the platform. So if you think about it, like ChatGPT, that's a real defining moment, I think, in the history of the web, or maybe even of humanity, where there was clearly a time before and a time after. Because before, you did have some vendors talking about like machine learning and big data sets and all this other stuff. But with ChatGPT, you have this intuitive, and scarily sort of relevant natural language interaction with whatever's behind behind the curtain. And so we actually, right after ChatGPT came out, I mean, within, I think, about a month, we had released a sort of automatic product description generation. But eventually, when we released AI Copilot, we provided a set of tools that supercharges operations in the back end. So it provides a depth of field and a convenient interface for store operations folk to do a number of things, whether it's image keyword assistance, so like you automatically building tags of images based on whatever digital media assets are stored, having the system adapt intelligently to the customer, whether it's their language or whether it's their language or some other criteria. We really want the system to be almost not there. Like you should never feel your software. You should never feel like, oh, I'm interacting with software. No, you should just be able to like click around, enter information, and just get the system to do stuff. Like that to me is really, really important. And it kind of builds on our overall sort of spirit of allowing the system to be customized without the use of a developer, which frees up developer resources to do customization.
Yeah, and on that point, right? I think the rule builder, the flow builder, these are sort of the sort of distinctive features of Shopware. I mean, they're meant to essentially allow a client to effectively make changes, customize with no code, right? Um, Moving forward, I mean that's the dream of every e-commerce
Yeah.
seller out there, right?
So we provide that. We provide it because at our core, we're built for customization, right? Turnkey solution. So full featured e-commerce environment, but we don't want you really shouldn't use Shopware just like it comes out of the box, right? The reason you choose Shopware is because there's enough of the raw material, there's enough of the core functionality that's going to satisfy at least 80% of your needs. But then you're going to want to stand out. You're going to want to customize customer journeys. You're going to want to change things on the front end. You're going to want to give focus and facility to the store ops folks in their various roles. So we see extensibility, integration, customization as first-class citizens, and that's both for the front end and the back end. And one of the there's two sort of key aspects of our system that make this really easy and don't require the intervention of a developer, and that's rule builder, which is sort of a catch-all phrase for our customer segmentation and how we want the system to be able to understand and identify customers by different criteria, and to be able to change content, behavior, et cetera, based on those criteria. And then flow builder is in a similar way. It bubbles up the core functionality, but allows you to compose different business flows and trigger different side operations based on the needs of the business. Again, without requiring a developer. Now, both of those systems themselves are extensible. So if you needed a dimension of data or different data that might be coming from a different source, but you want to expose it inside either of these utilities, you can a developer can do that for you. And then of course over time we release different formulations, different recipes, and then for Flow Builder specifically, we actually see this as almost a little mini application environment where we might even see different third-party vendors also building some of their integration, and then also even integration amongst themselves, right? It's a really powerful feature set, but again, it's all about handing power over to the store operators.
Yeah, and I think just sort of a comment from me on Shopware, from my perspective. I mean, it's that wonderful, delicate balance that Shopware is able to negotiate, right, between something that's off the shelf, to your point, and then being able to customize, because a lot of our clients are in that mid-market space, manufacturers, you name it, and they're growing. right? They're no longer that small company that's serving with a SaaS platform, right?
Right.
They need customization. They need, as they grow, they're serving more different types of customers, more products. So they need that customization to kind of cater to that incremental buyer, right? Out there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this the so there are lots of different approaches to the requirements of e-commerce in general, right? And SaaS can provide a lot of advantage. I mean, we even have a SaaS version of our offering, right? Um, but if you look even at the largest like SaaS e-commerce vendor out there, Shopify, they've got by some measure only 10% of the business, right? And there's a reason for that. It's because providing functionality for lots and lots of different verticals, volumes, geographies, and sort of in business modalities, B2B, B2C, B2B2C, D2C. These all have their have prioritized different things. And any software application that tries to be all things to all people is absolutely doomed to fail, because as you try and build out more flexibility, as you try to build out more features, you inherently add complexity. So you have to be adept at doing that. You also need a core architecture that facilitates that facilitates ongoing product development and especially integration, right? And that's both for how things need to be built initially, and then especially for how they go over time, because we do want to be partners in our merchants' growth. You need to have capacity built in for that growth. And we have this sort of monolithic core, but we have our whole belief there is that you can just take Shopware, put it could be on our infrastructure and your infrastructure, and it is essentially a packaged software that you can then throw API requests, do most of your customization and integration that way. And then if you need to have, some real low level core code level customization, it's super easy. It's open source, and there's a whole ecosystem around it. There's Slack channel, there's documentation. Everything is open for consumption. So we really think we've found a good balance with providing that open flexibility, but also the robustness of an application that's meant to just sit there and simply run in your environment, whatever that environment is.
Yeah, absolutely. You spoke, and I think the AI efforts that you guys are doing, speaks to that a little bit as well, right? I mean, I think one of the eight, based on the sort of my study here of the AI Copilot program that you guys mobilized. There's 8 features. I think one of them really struck me as really interesting: AI generated content for shopping experiences. So effectively, we think about ChatGPT, text to text, text to images. This is the kind of stuff where, it's image to text. Like, it can actually read the image and then develop keywords, maybe even develop a product description based on that keyword, or based on that image rather. Just amazing stuff, and that's the no code stuff. That's kind of, really interesting, right? Capabilities.
Yeah, where AI should be helping. I mean, it's the hype is starting to die down a little bit. Thank goodness. But AI should be purely assistive, right? It should be taking the work that your people were doing before ChatGPT and simply making them better at their job, because they have better access to deeper sets of data. They have a natural language interface into these things, and then you can do certain operations at a scale that wasn't possible because maybe it was very hands-on, like a complex export process, or going through some of our stores have millions of SKUs and tons of order data and lots of customer data points. And you need to have all of that available heads up, right? And that was novel, even a few months ago, but by this time next year, it's just an expectation. And if your platform isn't doing this, then you're probably falling behind your competitors. So we saw it as very important to come out right out of the gates, facilitate this shift, the introduction of AI into operations processes. And we'll continue to expand on that, because it really is, again, it goes back to our core value of empowering our merchants.
On that point, I know we've discussed this before around orchestration in AI. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I have this idea. I have this idea. I mean, I talk with very smart people. I get to be out there and I get to meet, founders, entrepreneurs, from other platforms, from adjacent solutions. But in particular, I was in Barcelona earlier this year, and I was chatting with Chris Bach, who's one of the co-founders of Netlify. And he made me aware that where one of the things that they're looking at these days is really overall orchestration of environments. So as this business has matured, and as people want, quote, composability, they want to be able to tie together lots of different solutions. You want a well curated core, but then you also want a curated, list of integrations that are, I'll use the cliche, best of breed. You want the plumbing for all of that, all of the whether it's kind of in the DevOps world or, but you could all put it under the umbrella of orchestration. That should require less and less resources over time. And I mean, the industry has shifted in that direction. I mean, it started with the advent of commodity computing, right? With AWS and Google Cloud, and Microsoft and some other vendors, right? So taking Microsoft Azure. So taking commodity computing and then building services in there, and helping people think less and less about the actual plumbing that goes between all these systems. That has been a goal of vendors, over the last several years. But with AI, I think you're going to see a whole new era of sort of offloading the burden of orchestration into just AI. And I think what I think is a very likely scenario is that sometime in the not too distant future, you could say, well, I know we're going to have a flash sale, or we're going to, what we used to call the Oprah effect. I know I'm going to be on the front page or featured on, morning news program, and we're going to need to scale up like 10x to handle that volume. And you can actually sit there and probably through a natural language interface in the storefront, be like, okay, scale up 10x, and back behind the scenes, all of the satellites link up, and and the capacity, both the processing and bandwidth is there to handle that load. We will, which is great, because all we're talking about is taking what we're doing today and removing a lot of the opportunity costs. And that's going to be further democratizing. It's actually, I think, going to bring all of us e-commerce platform solutions into more and more direct competition, right? Because we're all sort of approaching the same balance of flexibility, but dependability from different angles. And so we're all going to get there. And it's going to be a really glorious future, I think, for the technology buyers, over the next couple of years as this comes to pass.
Yeah, a scenario like that is where, the pricing changes automatically. Like once that order is issued, right? Flash sale this weekend, right? Pricing changes automatically, text changes, images change instantaneously, right? And AI can produce. Great question. Thank you for that feedback. My next question is really trying to understand Shopware's e-commerce tools. To your point, right? There's a bit of sort of off the shelf, but also, as a business grows into that mid-size, larger size scale, they want more customization. How does the e-commerce tool specifically help in that sort of personalization effort, right? To help these companies personalize their pitches to end users and end customers.
Yeah. So it's for Shopware really goes after where we think Shopware provides a ton of value. And we style it as sort of enterprise capability without the enterprise price tag. The mid-market, right? And mid-market always begs a definition, because I don't think I've ever heard mid-market defined the same. Like when I was at Adobe, mid-market was anything up to $1 billion GMV, right? And which is, I'd say that would be the absolute upper bound for a mid-market company. But we tend to think of, like, if you're especially once businesses get up into that 10 million, 20 million on up to 300, 400, 500 million range. And GMV volume is a poor proxy for utility, but it is kind of it's a useful and blunt shorthand. So these are businesses that are likely growing, likely have some really adept competition nipping at their heels, or they might be trying to nip at the heels of their peers. And we want to provide enough capability out of the box with ample flexibility to really put together buyer journeys, buyer journeys and operational capabilities that that can help any business sort of stand out, right? So it's not just about customizing for the front end, the end customer experience. It's also about making sure that your ops people have exactly what they need. And honestly, the better we are at that, at the back end of things, along with the agencies, then the people who come in, to their job and they sit down, or they're walking through the warehouse and trying to do pick lists and things like that, they shouldn't really feel the software. Like, ironically, the better we are, the less they'll actually notice that this is actually software. They're just like, oh, I'm just here, I'm doing my job, and nothing's getting in my way. So the ability to customize the system actually exists in multiple ways. So it kind of starts with deployments, right? So we have a SaaS version of our offering that you could kind of map to like how Shopify operates, right? Where customizations are very well curated, but the box is wound a little bit tighter. Now we actually allow for local customizations there via. So we have apps that integrate natively to connect other services, and then you can have local apps for customizing that. And then you can go from there. We have a platform version where we have the infrastructure, but there's much more agency, no pun intended, for over controlling the code and the environment, right? So we have deployment tools and deployment support and ongoing sort of stack management, but we really try and make sure that there's plenty of space for the businesses to do what they need. And then, of course, we excel in the self-managed world. So we have partnerships with hosting companies all over the world, really, who help us help deliver the exceptional uptime and level of service that merchants demand, right? So that covers the infrastructure. And then when you get into the application level, again, we're built from the ground up with tons of functionality. But like I said before, it's all designed to be customized or turned off or replaced. And some of the functionality can actually be customized without anyone touching a line of code. And that is through our no-code utilities, Rule Builder and Flow Builder. Rule Builder could be thought of if you're depending on how far your pedigree goes, depending on how far back your pedigree goes in e-commerce, what you might think of as, this is really advanced segmentation capability. But what you can do with the segmentation is that kind of leaks into a lot of other areas of the software, right? So you can make the system, you can present different content, different pricing, make the system behave in different ways based on these customer attributes. And so all of those are exposed via this facility we call Rule Builder. And then Flow Builder is another no-code solution that actually it allows to trigger different processes to truly like change business flows and compose those within the admin, again, without needing to write a line of code. But the cool thing about both of the systems is when you get an idea about how they function and what they make available, that's really cool that if someone needs to add additional functionality or expose different dimensions of different data there and make that available to those two systems, then you can do that, right? Again, even those systems are extensible. And then just thinking about our tech partnerships, so extensibility through integration, even some of the core things that we offer out of the box, those may be sufficient, but you may need a heavier hitting solution depending on your requirements. And that's where we have partnerships both with integration environments, which provide essentially a competent integration layer that can get certain integrations up and running almost instantaneously. And we also offer, of course, direct integrations with tight partnerships with payments vendors We have some strategic shipping integrations and things like this where consumer expectations have evolved so much in these spaces, especially around shipping, that we want to make sure that businesses can give customers exactly what they want, both today and down the road. Right? It's always important to keep in mind. You can have your RFP and those requirements that exist today, but you have to think about the projection of where the business is going, both from a volume standpoint, maybe from verticals, and certainly cross-border, which is another area where we absolutely excel because we were built for like multi-zone internationalization, sub-stores, all of that, and providing that capability out of the box. It means that you don't have to program in that level of flexibility and extensibility.
Yeah, I love that internationalization aspect, right? I mean, with all the supply chain issues, particularly, we see that in our customer base, many of whom are manufacturers. That seems like a powerful differentiator for Shopware. The one thing I want to add, sort of a comment on, was just the no code piece. To me, that's so powerful. I know those are the rule builder and provision or capability and flow builder capability speak to that. But I'm curious. The whole concept of no code automation for people who are not developers, so they can customize. So it's basically enhancing customization capabilities for a client without actually employing code. That to me is powerful, right?
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, right? And again, every bit of it's nice to provide the functionality and capabilities um, out of the box, but as a product company, we always have to keep an eye on the overall complexity of a system, because generally, as you start to add things to a system, it inherently becomes a little more complex. Um, so building out features like sort of these meta capabilities like flow builder, rule builder. Um, the goal is to provide what used to be or used to require code level changes, but essentially publish these, the different data that are involved and the different feature sets into an environment where you can safely start to stitch these things together or build dependencies based on different customer attributes. And the thing is, we couldn't release all of this for potentially everyone in the world, because trying to be all things to all people is a recipe for disaster. At some point, even open solutions like Shopware, we have to have some opinion about how things are done. But really, what people want to look for is how easily can those opinions about whether it's order management or a checkout flow, any of these areas, how easy is it to unwind those, to modify those to match your needs? Because you have some storefronts that literally are there only to serve up these things are actually probably being sold on social media streams, right? So if someone ends up at a website, their entry point is actually very deep into the site. They're not actually looking through the whole catalog. And that journey is going to be very different than someone who might be looking for, camera equipment or electrical supplies or something like that, where they're going to actually take a tour around and find what they might need and want to browse a whole catalog. So we can't know what's in the mind of the consumer. We can't know of every consumer. We can't know what's in the mind of every business out there. All we can do is create, like I say, the raw material that facilitates this, and then we put it in the hands of very often agencies and sometimes in-house merchant teams to deliver the actual functionality, the end functionality that's going to make a difference for that business. That's and that's why it's really important to be able to allow store operations folk to make these changes quickly, and without having to involve agencies, because that anytime you have an agency working on something or your in-house team working on something, you're going to gain a benefit from that, but that also comes at an opportunity cost, right? Because they're not working on something else. And so we want to optimize the the fixed resources of hours in a day and what an agency or an in-house team can accomplish. And by allowing operations folk to have a well curated, composition environment where they can say, okay, well, I need to identify these customers according to these criteria so that we can do these things, or I need to flow certain business operations a certain way. That's really, really powerful. And that actually really addresses the opportunity cost of customization in my mind.
Yeah, and it's interesting that speaks to sort of post launch, right? Particularly, right, when the platform itself can be extensible on the back of folks who are not developers, right? Our clients directly. Of course, before launch, again, Shopware provides the tools, I think, to kind of be able to be off the shelf, but at the same time tailor, and that'll require, of course, developers to be able to do that. But I think the tools are there, as you said before, to make this as efficient as possible, as economical as possible, right? So by the time the launch occurs, that transition is easy for the client to kind of carry over and lead.
Yeah, that's also a good point to bring up. You have to think about, I mean, there's an incredible amount of inertia. So like the customers that we're going after, I mean, if they're not already on Shopware, they're probably already platformed. So these are extant businesses, and they're the amount of the degree of inertia present in your previous platform decisions. I mean, I've seen it many times where a business absolutely knows without a doubt, like, hey, we have got to jump to a different platform. It still is a very, very tough process because dollars are rolling in, and working on this stuff on the side, you do start to divide up scarce resources. But one of the things that we really like is with our turnkey approach, you get you can get up and running on a highly customizable platform very, very quickly. And we like to think about a measurement that's not always spoken about, but time to first dollar, right, or time to first euro. So we want to be able we want to say that we're a solution, and like, hey, from the time that you say, okay, yes, we're going with this solution, we're going to start on this date. We want it to be a very, very quick turnaround until you can start meaningfully transacting on in that environment.
Yeah, got it. No, good stuff. I think you spoke briefly or earlier actually around AI and in e-commerce, and I know Shopware has first in market. Speaking of go to market, mobilized sort of, I think, 8 features in particular, right? AI Copilot, I think, is how Shopware is labeling it. I read through some of the data. I mean, AI generated content for shopping experiences. I mean, I know in talking to our clients who do e-commerce, they have to generate the content, but now the AI thing is enabling that to happen. It reads the product data and it just creates it, right? Which is a huge point. It supercharges the capabilities of our customers, which is great.
Well, and the what happens there. So right, like content. I mean, and we actually came out with a content feature for a like base. There's a moment there's clearly been a moment in modern online world. There was before ChatGPT and after. And immediately, I mean, within I think a month or so after ChatGPT just sort of refocused everyone's attention, we got to a point where we said, hey, we'll have this automated, this ability to generate product descriptions. It was very easy to work into, and you've seen actually that's been kind of the first feature that has come out for other platforms as well. But we also use AI with our Copilot to assist with exports, to actually help with customer classification. We also it can be important to build keywords from images. So if you have a huge digital media catalog for your business, if you've got millions of SKUs and stuff, you can actually have AI just go through and pull out and sort of analyze and then give you tags so that you can find that. You can search that in the back end, or we could offer relevant results in the front end. Product review summaries, providing targeted checkout messages, and even automating translation for reviews, especially if you need to go multinational. Like these are things that we see as additive, because the AI is absolutely an arms race, where like I said before, every platform knows that this has got a lot of attention, but it has a lot of power, and the solutions that are going to win are the ones that become more and more subtly but powerfully assistive to the operations that are happening, behind the scenes, right? So that a product marketing person should he or she should expect over the next year and years that the platform decision that they made, today is going to, lead to a compounding advantage as that system's AI capabilities become, bigger and better and more powerful. But it's not this like pie in the sky thing. It's just like, hey, this system just helps me do my work better. I can get more done. I have deeper insights. I'm working with a deeper depth of vision when I'm, doing my operations or making my business decisions. That's where we see AI especially fitting in. Now, where I think it's going to go in the future is going to be around orchestration. So I've had some great conversations recently with our friends on the more microservices composable side of things, and also with a leader in this area, Netlify, one of the co-founders there, Chris Bach. They're very much paying attention to the evolution of orchestration as the next sort of frontier in the space, right? Because the future that's coming for all of us, it will be steeped in AI, but it is, functionality that just runs. You think less and less about where it runs. You just kind of care less and less about it. You just want to be able to compose experiences for the front end and for the back end, and then just the operational side of that. It just gets thrown against APIs somewhere, and and then the return values are what drive those experiences. So we're trying to. I think you're going to see companies get better and better at this orchestration piece. We pretty much have it now with our multiple deployment methodologies, but you'll see a lot more orchestration, and then I think you'll see AI becoming more and more of a glue that binds an orchestration layer. So you can sit there and say like, hey. We are rapidly approaching, I think, a time where you can, I as a store person, as a store manager, can effectively say to my my store environment, we have a flash sale next week, scale up, and behind the scenes, this will just happen, right? It's going to see. It seems like science fiction right now, but so many things that we take for granted today were also science fiction years and years ago.
Right. Yeah, and that's so powerful, right? Because we're seeing sort of the tip of the iceberg, right? On ChatGPT, we see text to text, text to imaging. I love that AI Copilot is reversing that image to text, actually, right? Which is really powerful. And then using that data, that sort of foundation, right, to take it to the next level. This is my first time I've heard of this term orchestration, which is really powerful. To your point, right? Like, an LLM, like a ChatGPT, you tell the e-commerce platform, a flash sale, and then it executes it, right? And the price change that involves, the imaging changes, the text changes, all of that sort of instantaneously, right?
Yep.
That's awesome. One question, we're a company that has core values, mindfulness, collaboration, and we want to, in the work we do, we have there's a corporate kind of responsibility element to that, social responsibility. And so one question here is, how does technology like Shopware, in building e-commerce as a whole, positively impact underserved communities in the U.S., abroad? I know we've spoken about that before. You've got some clients, like I think one client in particular, Koro Shop, right, that helps, not mistaken, farmers, right, in the developing world sell organic crops or food, organic food to markets around the world.
Some of this is kind of, I think it stems from our German origin, and our HQ is there in very small town Germany. And I do enjoy my visits because Germany gets a lot of things right. I don't want to go into necessarily get into geopolitics and the greenwashing of things, but I do appreciate that there are competent like recycling schemes, and that people are the people that I interact with frequently in Germany, and even around that region, in Europe, tend to be, quite mindful of the impact of business and human activity on the overall world. So we really like that we can be a solution that businesses focusing on sustainability, and can use, and that we even have, we have at our core a free version, right? And that's, and it comes with a lot, a ton of functionality. In fact, we have extended functionality that's licensed, right? So we have 3 tiers of that, but all of that fundamentally at the center is our open source core, right? So that we are always building on the core feature set, but that core feature set is there for anyone to take. And we also, beyond that, we encourage our agencies, we encourage our customers, our prospects to really look at which offerings they need. And that is, for me, that also is it speaks to our philosophy that it's not all about, our revenue. We really, really want to ensure the right fit, because if not, then we're actually sort of, when that doesn't happen, you're kind of a drain on this overall ecosystem. And I do truly see the whole e-commerce solution landscape, we are all essentially rising and falling on the same tide, right? So for every platform out there, or every solution, whatever you want to call yourselves, the better that we understand what we do and who we serve, the better that we're facilitating the right businesses, or getting people to the right solutions that will benefit them. But again, it's nice because we have this free tier, that the power of Shopware can do a lot of good in a lot of places, and it actually helps us get into other markets. So there are over 40,000 transacting Shopware stores around the world, and they truly are out there, right, in every region except Antarctica.
Right, and maybe that'll change soon, right?
We'll see.
As well. Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned open source, which is really powerful, right? Open source community. That's the first part. Open source Unleashed. We're a PHP open sourced, focused digital firm. I know, of course, Shopware is also open sourced. So to me, that lends itself easily to community, to that sense of openness, to that sense of community, right, of developers and more broadly of customers. And I think, frankly, it puts us in a better place to understand responsibility to community at large, right? Makes it easier, I think, for us to, do the things I think that you guys do, right, with a free version, to facilitate that, to enable clients and to do e-commerce and to, freely service the less fortunate among us as well.
Yeah, there's a real democratizing power in open source, and actually, and I wish I could say that thought was mine and mine alone, but my good friend Roy Rubin, who's one of the co-founders of Magento, they had at the time, circa 2006, they were running an agency, and they were building bigger and bigger e-commerce, or trying to build bigger and bigger e-commerce solutions, using what was available at the time of something called OS Commerce. It's still around, but that was a project that was true open source, like no corporate backing, just a group of people building functionality together, and it wasn't robust. I mean, part of that had to do with the history of web languages and where PHP its origins as well. But I went on a hike, after Roy had sold all of his shares and had cashed out with eBay. Went on a hike with him outside LA, and I asked him a question about if he had any expectation that Magento was going to be what it was. And I thought I knew the answer would be, of course. Oh, no way, man. I just blew up on me. But no, he didn't miss a beat. He said, yeah, of course. He's like, I wanted to change the balance of power, in this, particularly in the world of e-commerce, because if you think about it, at the time, like the early 2000s, if you're trying to deploy any kind of really significant e-commerce offering on the web, you were going with WebSphere, ATG. You were going with one of the big enterprise players, right? And so it was the big vendors that held the keys. They controlled everything. And Roy and Yoav correctly intuited that if they built an open source product that they built it right, and they put out the right messaging, and then they made the right connections, at a business level with boardrooms and stuff, that they would grow this ecosystem that would absolutely, supercharge the offering itself and allow it to organically grow into multiple different, regions, verticals, et cetera. And that's exactly what happened. And I think that remains true to this day, that that open source becomes a very democratizing force because it has its roots in the, like free software foundation. But mostly because it's, e-commerce requirements they're all arbitrary and almost a bit chaotic if you try and consider them in total and over time. And the best way to handle chaos is to just, put the tools out there and let people who understand, a particular corner of chaos, compose the solutions that make sense. And that is why I often say the least interesting thing about open source is the code. It really is all about the spirit of collaboration and the community that naturally coalesce around a well-led open source project. And even further, as you start looking at the vendors that operate in the space, you end up with this spirit of coopetition. And I really like it because, you will have competitors, and I'm sure you all do this. You speak with other agencies, and even agencies, with whom you might be competing for on occasion for customers, but you collaborate because it's better to collaborate than to just try and block everyone out. You can say, hey, what's going on? What do you guys see? Or hey, do you have a solution for imports of this type, or do you have a solution for an integration, or what is your experience with, this kind of personalization feature or suite? We can save collectively, we can save a lot of time and wasted effort if we collaborate. And I would argue that collaboration tends to happen in more open environments. And it doesn't necessarily have to be around a quote open source project. I mean, I have to give due credit to like BigCommerce, who have a very good partner team and a very good partner operating environment, and they facilitate, I think, this kind of exchange. So I'm not trying to brand open source as the only provider of or facilitator of open collaboration, but it does tend to attract that kind of conduct and that kind of benefit.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned collaboration. Collaboration is actually one of our core values, one of our 5 core values at Unleashed. It's the best food for thought, what you just said, right? For a lot of the folks who are considering Shopware, right? That collaboration, that open source, it means so many things. Collaboration between vendors, collaboration between, client and vendor, right? And making sure that process, and of course, the open source community of developers out there. We're running out of time. So last question, what's one thing you want people to know about Shopware?
Depends on the audience. You could say that we exist, right? I mean, that's been, we're getting the word out about Shopware, but if there's anyone even with Shopware on their radar, or even not, even if Shopware is not on your radar, you should be asking yourself of the solutions that are being proposed to you, or of your current solution, like, does this business care about my success? Are they actively facilitating my success? Are they keeping an eye on what's coming down the pipe? Better yet, are they trying to define what's coming down the pipe? Because that's very much our orientation. And with that approach, it makes us, I think, a really good partner in that sort of the tapestry that's necessary for merchants and brands to succeed in e-commerce and in omni-channel, right? You need a collection of great vendors around you, and we seek to be the ideal partner in all aspects, to our technology vendors, to our agencies, and of course, to our customers.
Absolutely. And we think so highly. That's why we became a partner of Shopware as well. Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate the conversation about e-commerce and specifically Shopware's part in that story as we navigate, personalization, AI, all these trends. Thanks to you, Ben, for joining us today. And thanks to the audience for listening in on this Unleash This podcast today. To all those watching and listening in, if you need any insight on the Shopware vision and platform today, or have any questions on any of the topics that we covered, please connect with us at unleash-technologies.com. It's just under our my name in particular. We'd love to keep the conversation going and help you make the best technology, choice selection for your, business or organization. Until next time, please keep that technology unleashed. Thank you.